1. Hans said to his friend Kurt, "I'm going to take my car and drive to London." Kurt said, "Driving to London is very difficult. You aren't going to find your hotel." But Hans was not afraid. He drove to Calais, put his car on the ship, took it off at Dover, and drove to London. He stopped near the city and looked at his map. Then he drove into London, but he did not find his hotel. He drove round and round for an hour, and then he stopped and got out of his car. A taxi came, and Hans stopped it. "Take me to the Brussels hotel," he said. But he did not get into the taxi, he got back into his car. The taxi man laughed, but then he drove to the Brussels hotel, and Hans followed him in his car. They reached the hotel in 2 minutes. 2. George is a young man. He does not have a wife, but he has a very big dog and he has a very small car too. He likes playing tennis. Last Monday he played tennis for an hour at his club, and then he ran out and jumped into a car. His dog came after him, but it did not jump into the same car, it jumped into the next one. "Come here, silly dog," George shouted at it, but the dog stayed in the other car. George put his key into the lock of the car, but the key did not turn. Then he looked at the car again. It was not his. He was in the wrong car. And the dog was in the right one. "He's sitting and laughing at me," George said angrily. But then he smiled and got into his car with the dog.
3. Mr. and Mrs. Jones very seldom go out in the evening. But last Saturday, Mrs. Jones said to her husband, "There's a good film at the cinema tonight. Can we go and see it?" Mr. Jones was quite happy about it, so they went, and both of them enjoyed the film. They came out of the cinema at 11 o'clock, got into their car and began driving home. It was quite dark. Then Mrs. Jones said, "Look, Bill. A woman's running along the road very fast, and man's running after her. Can we see them?" Mr. Jones said, "Yes, I can." He drove the car slowly near the woman and said to her, "Can we help you?" "No, thank you," the woman said, but she did not stop running. "MV husband and I always run home after the cinema. And the last one washes the dishes at home." 4. There were a lot of men's clubs in London a few years ago. Men went there and read their newspapers quietly, or drank or had meals with their Irians. All of these men's clubs had a lot of very good servants. At every club one of the servants is a doorman. Mr. Grace was the doorman of one of these clubs. He was 55 years old, and he had gray hair and a big gray mustache. The telephone rang in his office at 6 o'clock in the evening, and a woman spoke to him. She said, "Are you the doorman of the George Club?" "Yes, I am," Mr. Grace answered. "Please give my husband a message." The woman said, "Your husband isn't at the club this evening." Mr. Grace answered, "But I haven't told you his name." The woman said angrily, "That isn't necessary," Mr. Grace answered. "No husband is ever at the club."
5. Jimmy lives in London and he began swimming a few months ago. He likes swimming, and he often goes to the swimming pool near his house with his mother and swims there for an hour or two. He was 6 years old last week, and his mother said, "You swim quite well now, Jimmy, but you've never seen the sea, have you? Your father and I are going to take you there on Sunday, and you're going to swim in the sea. It isn't cold now, and it's much like than a swimming pool." Jimmy's father and mother took him to the sea in their car on Sunday, and they stopped at the side of a small harbor. Jimmy went out and looked at the sea for a long time, but he was not very happy. Then he said to his mother, "Which is the shallow end?"